And welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie. I am so privileged to be here with you today. So excited for this topic. It could very well be kind of like the fight of our lives to figure out how to master our minds and how to begin healing and be able to not just begin healing for the sake of coming to a neutral place, but to be able to get to the point where we are the master and commander of our body, of our mind, of our soul, of our spirit, so that we can live in accordance with the fullness of who we get to be, who we can be. Yesterday, that the conversation happened that actually inspired this talk. And it all started with me pointing out one of my favorite speeches by Theodore Roosevelt. And he talks about this call and this charge to the common individual. He's not just speaking to other elites or executives or kind of the top echelon of the country at the time, but he was talking to the normal everyday folks, and he was calling them to greatness. And I was talking with someone, and it was actually a vendor of mine. And we just started diving into this whole conversation around how do we call ourselves forth so that we hold the standard, so that we actually are able to self perpetuate inspiration and self perpetuate excitement around the things that we're called to do around our lives, so that we don't have to wait for someone else to call us forth, but that we actually have the ability to master our mind, call ourselves forth, and then go live in the fullness of our own potential. And then it's you and me versus ourselves, not us being called forth by somebody else and thus being held to someone else's standards. If we're motivated and perpetuated by the external, it's going to be so much harder for us to kind of self-induce the motivation that's necessary when things are hard in our lives, or when things don't feel fair, or when there is grief or loss. But if we have the internal stamina and perseverance to get back up and to go with intention into the ring, to go into the arena, fight out, kind of juke out the things that need to be healed, to grow on our own accord and by our own self-will, then when the going does get tough, we still have that same kind of drive. And then how much more powerful is it to have other people cheering us on? But the cheering on and the external inspiration, let's say, is in addition to a baseline and a foundation that you and I have that's strong and firm, that we can stand on our own 2 feet and get back up on our own. And then everyone else is just a bonus. So before we really dive into our conversation today, I actually want to do something that I don't normally do. I actually want to take time to pray and just really ask God's help, because this conversation, again, it is so meaningful. Being able to master our minds is perhaps the fastest and surest way to internal freedom, where we're no longer being like hounded by depression and anxiety and fear of what other people are going to think. Much more so, fear of the past and what already has happened, and having those narratives from the past. It's like a haunting. You know, there's this story by Charles Dickens. He wrote, it's called A Christmas Carol. And the way he wrote it was absolutely brilliant. I believe from sitting down with pen to paper through actual production, I think it was a 6-week timeline leading up to Christmas. And so he gets this masterpiece out within 6 weeks. But there's this character that was called to mind just now called Jacob Marley. And he is the business partner of the hero of the story, Ebenezer Scrooge. And he comes 7 years after his death to visit Ebenezer. So he's a haunting in and of himself. And he is effectively looking at Jacob and saying, he's looking at Ebenezer, and he's like, Ebenezer, if you do not learn how to kind of get your life together and learn how to experience the internal freedom that is joy and peace and love and hope, all of those kind of good qualities that have to do on the other side, and when we get to experience on the other side of this internal freedom of spirit, of soul, of mind, then you are going to be haunted, not just in life, but also in death. There's this example that Charles Dickens gives where Jacob, when he comes to Ebenezer 7 years after his death, he has chains linking all about him, and tethered to each chain is a money box. And it's these links and yards that he created during his life of unforgiveness and financial like obsession. And so everything that kept him not free actually became like a physical chain manifesting the internal lack of freedom that he had with this obsession towards the external, or the unforgiveness in his heart and the inability to love and the inability to give it away. There's a book to this point called Die with Zero, and the concept is to live such a full life now and to have the money serve us now and to give it away now, whether it's through giving it away in succession down to your generational line, or to actually give it away to through philanthropy, or to just literally experience life. So this concept of die with zero, there's something around the external. The external is so often a mirror for us of what's going on internally. So if we are in conflict with other people, how much is that actually a mirror for what's going on internally in the internal state of our soul and our spirit? So I want to just say a prayer for us, because freedom really is the goal in so many ways. We cannot live in the fullness of our potential and who we were created to be in the first place if we have yet to really be able to kind of master the ability to break free in our own minds. And then from there, we can experience the fullness. So I'm going to go ahead and say a quick prayer. Father, thank you. Thank you for our time. What a gift it is to be here, to have this show, to have every single person who's tuning in now, who will tune in later. God, we just thank you for that experience that is coming together and community. And God, I just ask that this conversation would be something, I just kind of got this picture of like stretching the bounds and stretching the corners of our minds, even of like what's possible, that we would feel stretched this morning, that we would kind of buttress up against our own limiting beliefs and our own limitations from even our own experience. And we would get to learn with each other and alongside each other based on what is ultimately the capital T truth, your truth, around how should we engage with our minds. In Jesus' name, amen. Y'all, our minds, I just had this thought. If we were to do an audit of our minds right now, what kind of a place would it be? What would you find if you were to kind of go and sit inside your mind right now? What thoughts occupy it? Think of it kind of like you're going to a movie theater and you're watching your thoughts on the screen pass by. What are they filled with? What do you think about? And if you were to kind of break up percentages, let's say work takes up 50% and then family takes up 30%, or maybe a relationship takes up 20%. And so if we were to do this audit, then it's okay, well, let's actually break it down further from there. So we've got the categories of what constitutes our thoughts, but then what about those thoughts which are actually life-giving or life-depleting? Because there is no neutral thought. Every single thought is either contributing to, adding to, like blowing oxygen in us towards the direction of life, or it's detracting and pulling back and like squelching the life from within us. And so if we were to take radical responsibility for each thought and take it captive, the goal is that as the thought comes by, kind of that movie screen, we actually take it and examine it and say, oh, why is this here? Yesterday, as I was talking with this vendor friend of mine, he asked this question. He was like, well, he was like, it's actually kind of a scary thought because we were talking about going up on stage and talking on stage. And he was like, you and our mutual friend, he was like, you and Qasim it's so easy for you guys to get on stage and talk. And he was like, I really envy that. I wonder what other people are going to think of me. And I just hear that little voice inside my head of what my parents used to say to me when I was a kid. And that's what started this whole conversation around thoughts, because it at face value, kind of if you think of like the outside of the onion is, oh, what are people going to think? People here in this crowd actually probably have the same type of prowess as I do. Why am I speaking to them when they could easily be up here in my place? Who am I? And then we start second guessing. But then when you actually start peeling back the onion, at the core are actually the real narratives that we're battling up against, and it's what was told to us when we were children. So these kind of like outer layer, outer peel thoughts, that's going to be the thing that's flashing up on the screen. But man, if we take that thought captive, and then like an onion, we were actually to take that thought and kind of peel back the layers and just be curious and say, well, why is that there? Why did I think that? And then peel it back and then get even deeper. Okay, well, why is that there? Where did that come from? And it's like, the Wizard of Oz following the yellow brick home. We want to get all the way to the core of that onion, to the nucleus of that thought, because it's there for a reason. And it might actually have hardly anything to do with you and me. It might have everything to do with what we actually witnessed and saw happen as children. Maybe we saw abuse, or maybe we saw injustice, and maybe we saw somebody get cheated out of money, and so money just isn't safe. There's a lot of narratives and thoughts wrapped up in money, in relationship, in intimacy, in love, in even work. And so this whole concept of looking at our mind and actually sitting down and doing an audit of it, it does take time. But man, on the other side of that, we get to experience the freedom we were talking about. And so my friend asked me, he was like, well, how do you come to know these narratives? And before we come to this point of just like, well, how do we actually get to know these narratives? I just want to jump here in the chat. Hello, friends. I'm so glad to see you. Jettison, hello. Good to see you. Shams said hello. Good to see you. Oliver, I'm glad you're here. 2:44 a.m. Southern Hemisphere with a gentle pitter-patter of rain. Ah, that's beautiful. Brian, good to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for joining today. I am going to turn off the subscribers only. Let me see how I can do that with ease. People to not be able to join us if they'd like to. So let me go ahead and turn that off. Or actually, maybe if you're able to do that with ease, Brian, I'm not sure. I am going to look. Are you able to turn that off? Because I'm not sure how to actually do that right now. Let me see. All right, let's see. Let me redo this. Husky Rescue, good morning. Good to see you. I'm glad you're here. All right, well, I'm not able to. I don't know how to turn that off. Brian, if you're there, if you can turn that off, I don't know how to do it. I like being able to kind of let people, even if they're not subscribers, comment, just so that we can all hang out together. All right. So yesterday, as we were talking around how do we really get to this point of being able to examine these narratives that we have, there was kind of a little bit of a step process that I want to walk us through. The very first one is, our minds are actually conditioned to keep us safe. Our brain is intended to keep us in survival. It wants us to survive. So the goal is to actually protect us from anything that's a threat. So the pain, emotional pain, we've talked about this before on the show. It has been found time and time again that our body, our brain, our self stores emotional pain the same as it does something physical. So, for example, if somebody goes through a traumatic car accident, that obviously is going to have a physiological, neurological response as it stores the trauma, as it absorbs the impact, as it absorbs the physical pain that is the aftermath of the accident. All of that is actually stored in our body. And what has been found in the last 20 years of research is that if someone experiences emotional pain, such as rejection, social rejection, our body, our brain, neurologically, physiologically stores that social rejection in a similar way as it does that car accident. And so what that shows us is that the power of the mind surrounding what has happened to us in the past, it needs to be addressed. Otherwise, that is going to have the same amount of power over us in a subconscious physiological way that it's like, man, our body reacts and our body responds before we even have a chance to say, well, wait a second, is that what I want to do? Am I actually the one in the driver's seat? So this conversation around mastering our thoughts has so much more to do about how do we get ourselves in the driver's seat of our life without the reactive type of survival mechanism like the lizard brain sitting in the driver's seat, trying to just protect us from experiencing the emotional pain again or the social pain again that we did in the past. Just as our body has learned the kind of the physical ways to keep us out of physical harm, it has learned emotional tricks to keep us from emotional pain. But that type of trick or habit or behavior that kept us safe when we were kids may actually not be relevant today because we have a completely different environment. So we learned not to touch a hot stove when we were little. Well, maybe we learned, as children, you better eat your dinner within 10 minutes or else you're going to get a whooping. But now, today, you actually don't need to stuff your face in 10 minutes, or you actually don't need to finish your food if you're not hungry. Dinner can actually be something that's a leisurely experience over the course of, 90 minutes. It could be that if you choose. But our body literally physiologically responds and starts stuffing food down, and we're not even consciously aware that we're doing it. So that's just a small example of how our body can be reacting to something to keep us safe in an environment that no longer exists. So our goal and our aim is to actually be free from that so that we can be free today. It's freedom from that for the sake of freedom today so that we can actually create the life that we want, create the life that's possible. And when we think about the life that we want, it's, well, who do you want to be? Do you actually want to have free reign in the driver's seat and actually make the decisions for you based on your environment today, based on your own ideal and your dream and your vision for your life, based on your unique talents and skill sets? It's kind of a real blessing to graduate from living in reaction and living in fear. Man, isn't that a luxury? What a blessing that is, to move away from that state of living tense and fearful all the time that a lot of times people did experience as kids. We're not in that experience anymore, but we have to actually go and teach our body that it's now safe. So that's step number one. How do I actually, if we want to start engaging with our mind and understanding what are the thoughts that are there, what are the beliefs that have driven the behavior of how I show up today? If we want to come to know that, we actually need to create a safe space for our physical body. Again, our physical body tries to keep us safe and has behaviors and tactics to keep the pain away. But man, if we want to intentionally go into the pain, because in order to get free from something, we actually have to know it. So I need to create a space, like a physical space for me to go into today to go and experience that pain. But it needs to be safe so that my body actually lets me access the memories. Because sometimes our bodies, in effort to keep us safe, they've really blocked out the past. So step number one is creating a physical safe space where it's, okay, this is my dedicated time of day and my physical space to go into the pain of the past so that I can become acquainted with, call it the shadow. For every good thing about you and me, for every great light, there's an equal great shadow. So if we want to get to know the dark side, let's say, we actually need to have the place to do that. So that's step number one. And the way that looks for me is every morning before I start my day, that is the very first thing I'll do. Sometimes, occasionally, I'll go to the gym first, but going and setting aside that time every morning and honoring that, I actually call it vertical alignment. It's the principle of getting my mind, body, soul, spirit, my mindset, my thoughts, all of my behaviors into alignment, where otherwise it's kind of scattered and other people are at the helm of the ship. But I want to bring myself into alignment under the hierarchy of what's my ideal? Who do I want to be? What's the life that I want to create? And then submitting to that. But then ultimately, well, who did God create me to be? How much greater is his vision for me than my own vision for myself? And then, man, does that allow me to dream bigger and see bigger? So creating that space, that's the principle of vertical alignment, is bringing all of that into submission under the hierarchy of who does God say that I am? Who do I want to be? But the practice of that is I've got my journal. I've got actually a lot of times my laptop so I can take notes. I type faster than I write. I've got music. I have a candle. And I just like create this beautiful little setting. And a lot of times I'll actually have a blanket just to feel really like cocooned. And that's such a beautiful space. And it's kind of like a ritual. Someone actually said that when I explained this to them I was on a podcast the other day, just talking about this practice and how much it's made an impact in my life. Because every single morning, taking the time to not just unpack thoughts from the past years that have governed my life, but the thoughts of yesterday, the thoughts of here right now, what's coming up for me right now that I need to get free from. And what does freedom feel like? Understanding what freedom feels like and what the actual, we talk on the show about our four intelligences: intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual, and physical intelligence. Understanding what freedom feels like on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, physical, and intellectual level. So, are my thoughts intellectually, let's just play this out. Are my thoughts my own? Or how many of my thoughts have been fed to me by somebody else, either in the past, it was a parent or a teacher, maybe a pastor or somebody religious, telling me what to think about the world, about myself, about God, versus how many thoughts are actually my own based on my own experience. Obviously, we need other people's input. But again, like we said earlier, we started out the show talking about the power of being self-perpetuated with motivation. We're able to self-perpetuate motivation, self-will to get back up so that now the encouragement of others is just bonus on top. But we're removing our need, like an actual need for other people to be the ones to get us moving, to get us motivated, to be the ones affirming what we believe, who we are, what's our core experiences with the world. Now I actually get to be the one in the driver's seat of my life because I have intellectual freedom. And then emotional freedom, how many of my feelings are actually tied to other people, where somebody else could send me a text message and man, they have so much power over me that I can get emotionally in a tailspin for the entire rest of the day, and they have ruined my whole day. That means that I actually don't have emotional freedom. I don't have emotional autonomy, because if somebody else can come in and ruin my day like that, man, they actually are they're the ones that have the power over me on an emotional level. And spiritually, do I actually have my own spiritual connection with God? Do I actually have my own relationship? Or is it simply a religion? There's a big difference between religion and relationship. And is it mine? Have I taken the time? So step number one is creating that sacred space. And again, I like the ritual aspect of it with the candle and the music and having like the igniting of the senses. The more we ignite our senses through smell and taste and the audible hearing, the more it actually grounds us in that moment. It kind of brings us into this present moment. And now I can start to kind of process and unpack the past here in the present moment. But here's the thing that's interesting, and we'll move on to the next step here in a second. Having the safe space is so critical, because when our body comes into a place of calm, it's like stasis. Now we can introduce something new. Until we calm our body down, it's going to be on that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and it's going to be operating in survival. We can never introduce a change in our operating system. Our body, man, it's so funny. I one of my clients, we're actually wrapping up a project with them. I don't think they understood how long it would take to change their internal operating system. It takes time. It takes time to introduce new technologies and get people onboarded and create the mechanisms and tweaks. And man, does it take time. Same goes for us. We have an internal operating system that's been operating for however old you are, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. That operating system is going to take time. But in order to see the tweaks and like going in to tinker in the shop, we actually need to make sure that the shop is settled and the shop is calm, and that there's not mice running through, or there's not crazy other people inside the shop. So when we take our bodies, brains, minds, soul, spirits, and we want to actually do some work, that sacred space, the reason why it's so important that it's peaceful and calm and that no one else is there is because, man, this is time to actually do the work and work out some kinks in the operating system. And through the stasis of our internal state, then we can introduce new ways of thinking. But until we get to that place of calm, we actually can't. So a lot of people will, I'm talking about a self-induced place, safe space. A lot of people go to therapy and that's their safe place. And that's a really good first step if you've never done this. But it's really possible for us to be able to do this with ourselves. So that's number one, create the safe space. Number two is actually, I like this concept of just closing your eyes. And what are those kind of old memories? What are things that are coming back and that are showing up that need to be worked through? And it could just be a simple thought. So he asked me yesterday, the gentleman who started this whole conversation, he said, what about memories that I can't access? And I said, well, you starting with creating that safe space and you starting to just kind of do the tinkering with whatever thoughts are coming up for you, and then proving to yourself that you are not going to judge it and shame it and do the thing that there's a reason why we cover up. That's shame. The covering up is shame. And we learn to do that because of being mocked or because of being pointed at and laughed at, or because we maybe even got spanked or punished physically for having that experience. So the more we're actually able to experience whatever thought is coming up and then not be judgmental of it, that's actually going to open the pathway for more thoughts to come forth and more memories to reveal themselves. So one, create the space. Two, engage with the thought from a place of curiosity and ideally gratitude. Those old behaviors exist for a reason. They exist because they probably kept you safe. Remember, every single one of us learned behaviors on an emotional level, learned thoughts and belief systems on an intellectual level, all of which to help us fit in, to survive when we were kids. Well, we're not in that environment anymore. But that doesn't mean that behavior is a quote unquote bad behavior. Maybe we did learn some really unhealthy things when we were young, but it only helped us back then. And that warrants us to be really compassionate and really, really kind towards that part of us. I'm just jumping here in the chat. Oliver J.S. Moore, he says, weren't you going to tell us why you're not monetized yet? Yes, Oliver, I realized that I actually haven't been brave. I was thinking about that actually in my vertical alignment this morning. I have not been brave to create courses, and that's going to change. I haven't been brave. And I think that I know that there's a lot of talk about belief systems impacting behaviors. What's the belief around why that is? And I'm still working through that. I don't know exactly what the belief is. I actually think that there's a number of beliefs, and I need to do more work on that. So tomorrow I'm actually going to be planning out, knowing, and just kind of dreaming of what's possible and what's going to come for knowing, and the courses and the community and all of that. So this is really just the beginning, but man, I feel like even just your question of why is this not monetized is calling me forth. So thank you. Y'all, we all need each other. We need each other to kind of shine that light and say, hey, I'm going to challenge you to be bigger or better and dream more for yourself. And that's why we're all here. So Sammy, I'm so glad to see you. Oh, Sammy. Oh no. We are writing for Sammy as he has had some setbacks since his last scans. Please know Sammy prays to hear from you, and we pray. I'm so grateful. Sammy, I was thinking about you this morning, and I'm so glad. I'm so sorry I haven't been live over the last couple of weeks, and I'm just so glad to see your name here. Thanks for not giving up on me. Image Elohim, hello. I'm so glad to see you. J8, thank you for joining. The lizard, liar, killer, and sinner from the beginning. Wow. Wow, what an interesting point. Oh my gosh. It's a simple thing to do, and you will open yourself up to a new income stream, which you deserve. Well, now I'm going to go cry. You saying that, I actually, it's funny. I don't think I thought I deserved it. My friend wrote a book, Stop Self-Sabotage, and it's all about what we deserve. Like we get what we deserve. And Oliver, I think you really helped me just now. Thank you so much. I think that that's it. I think I fundamentally have not believed I deserve it. So I'm going to go do some work, y'all. Byron, good to see you. Thank you for joining. Y'all, I'm excited. I'm back in the driver's or saddle, I guess, back in the saddle of the show. And we'll be on here every day from here on out. Let's do a whole nother year and a half of not breaking our streak of going live. So thank you all so much for joining today. I will see you tomorrow on the Knowing Show.